Welcome one and all to Last Stop Penn Station podcast featuring Carrie Silkin and Ian Riccoboni. They dive deep into Carrie's wealth of stories, and no subject is off limits. From the world of wrestling to his ticket agency, growing up in New Jersey, drug-fueled underground days, hustling in the French Quarter of New Orleans, and endless days and nights in New York City, every story is worth telling.
Welcome, everyone, to Last Stop Penn Station. Ian Riccoboni, Carrie Silkin. Carrie, do we have a special one for you here today? The Summer Sizzler Tour rolls on.
Yes, George Napolitano.
Yeah.
It's all right. We just spoke to him.
Yeah.
And I knew it was going to be good.
This blew my... There's something at the end. You have to listen all the way through. We're recording the intro after we've already spoken to him. Listen to the end because there's one story that will blow your mind. I've never heard this before. I've read everything George has written pretty much. I've seen just about every picture he's ever taken, except for the picture he says he took in a very special location. I don't want to spoil it. Listen to the very end.
Yeah, talk about some pop culture icons,
right,
and just great stories. But yeah, George has done it all in pro wrestling as well as other fields of
baseball, hockey. He's talking about.
Right.
You know, it's incredible. George, of course, one of the great magazine publishers, which means he got to spend a lot of time from the late 60s to the early 70s, all the way through the present. You know, he's still rubbing elbows with The Rock on red carpets.
Right. So he went from Buddy Rod, seeing Bruno beat Buddy Rod,
which that blew my mind. And he in detail can detail the match.
Then gets pulled into the wrestling photography business by accident,
right?
Basically,
after being a signed recording artist, which also blew my mind.
And he's been my good friend for many years. You're a good friend for quite a few years. I've known him since 99.
Yeah,
and. I mean, I knew of him way before that, but through Bushwhacker Luke, they've been lifelong friends. But he's a good man, and it's going to be a good interview. If you're new to Last Stop Penn Station, please subscribe.
Yeah. We don't often do interviews. When we do, we make it count. And this one, I think we're making it count.
Yes, it's a good one. So let's get right to it.
Yeah. We hope you watched Ring of Honor this week. We hope you watched the women's tournament. It's awesome. We saw Quinn McKay advance. This week, they are Max taking on Holiday in the women's tournament. Champions versus All-Stars. But we have a champion and an All-Star. We have a guy who should be in all the Wrestling Hall of Fame, George Napolitano, and he's coming up right now. Well, Carrie, it's another very special week this week here on Last Stop Penn Station. We're so excited to welcome our special guest, Hall of Fame level photographer. And, first ballot for me, he's somebody whose work has appeared everywhere. This guy hangs with The Rock, Carrie. I saw the picture of him and The Rock together, one of his best friends, hobnobbing with celebrities, A-listers.
And
A-lister Curry.
and a photographer for the Mets.
And the photographer for the Mets, that's right. Let's welcome George Napolitano. Over 50 years in sports photography, including some historic wrestling shots. Welcome to Last Stop Penn Station, George.
Well, thank you very much. It's my pleasure. Finally, I had to wait my turn to get on to talk with you guys, but it was well worth the wait.
I met George. I mean, I would see George in the 70s at the Garden, and I knew of him from the wrestling magazines. And then I used to sit front row at ECW. George probably doesn't remember it, but I would occasionally, they were always late, right, George? The shows always started at 45 minutes late.
Of course.
I would have a couple work with George, but I got to know George in Puerto Rico.
Really?
Through Bushwhacker Luke.
Oh,
yeah. George had been friends with for 20 years at that point?
It could have been, because I met him first in 1972 in Jarry Park in Montreal.
Wow. George, did you start off?
Yeah, so a long time.
I know you're a baseball guy now. Did you start wrestling though in the Garden, or?
Oh yeah. Baseball came later. in the 80s, only because I wanted to do something different. Because people would say, "Oh, you're a wrestling photographer," and I wanted to show that I'm a photographer, and I needed a break from matches, because matches at that time, I was going 2-3 times a week, different places, and being away on weekends all over the country. I needed a break, so baseball was a diversion. I didn't need to take the picture for any particular reason, just whatever. And I used to work at that point for the Mets, one of the guys for the Mets.
Well, might as well go to the beginning, George. How did you, I guess you were a wrestling fan like all of us?
Yeah, a wrestling fan, and that's why I love your posters. When I see Bruno Sammartino, Buddy Rogers, and Sweet Daddy Siki, and all these posters that you got all over. And it's reminiscent. I used to go as a fan to Roller-Rama. And you don't have too many posters of Roller-Rama from the 60s. That's where I went a lot. And then I was at the Garden as a fan when Bruno Sammartino defeated Buddy Rogers in the 43 second.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were they enforcing the 14-year-old rule?
Then you can count my age.
Okay. Was that match as quick as they say it was? Was it really 43?
Yeah, for sure. Throws him off the rope, backbreaker, bear hug, and before I know it, people were going crazy. New champ Bruno, Italian, Napolitano was Italian, and I went with a friend named Jerry Rollo, and we used to fight all the time. He was a Buddy Rogers fan, so finally I got him, and in the blue seats all the way up. We were sitting, and when Bruno won, we had a fight. Finally, my guy won. Yeah.
I don't want to tell your story for you, but I heard you speak on another interview that you sort of faded out of wrestling once you got into rock and roll and the Beatles.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Well, I was going to say I was 63, and then the next year, not even February, I see the Beatles and Ed Sullivan, and my father says working for him at the time was the guy who played guitar in a band at the Peppermint Lounge. So he was working for me, right? Yeah. So my father goes to me, "You want to learn how to play guitar?" He figured I was going to say no. I said, yeah. And the guy would come over to my house every week and teach me guitar chords and stuff. And then when I told my friends about it, they said, "Can he teach us too?" And I asked him. He said, "Yeah." And it was 5 of us, and he taught all together how to play. And then he would say, "You're the bass player, you're the organ player, you're the drummer," and we formed a band. And within a year's time, we got a record contract with Mercury, Smash Records. Yeah. And I have my plastic 45s. I got plastic 45s. I got 3 of them on my wall.
Wow.
Yeah. Did you know that? You didn't know that?
I didn't. I knew you played, but you never got your big hit.
We never got a big hit. We were always 8 feet from stardom. We were the house band for WMCA, the Good Guys.
That's cool.
We used to back up all kinds of people who would come in, and Chubby Checker, Neil Sedakis, Shirelles, Chiffons, J.J. Jackson, whoever. And we used to back them up. And as part of the show, we put our own song. And then we would be the background for these groups. And if somebody had their own group, Fifth Estate or whoever they may be, they would use our equipment, and we got paid because we were part of the show. Not part of the show. We were the house band for the show. So we got paid, and these other people were just making appearances. That was my
George.
I say that's my first life.
Where was your musical head at in '69 around the Woodstock time?
Well, of course, being in the band that we were in, we were more of a dance band. Right. So I wasn't into heavy metal or guitarists that turn their back to the crowd and just play. We were a dance band. We were more in the mold of the Rascals and later the Vanilla Fudge, and dancing, having a good time and playing, doing a lot of soul, R&B. That's what we did. So at Woodstock, there were groups that I really weren't into that much, but I wanted to go. I had a 63 T-Bird. I was going with friends. My trunk is full of cookies. I work for Nabisco. So I had a trunk full of cookies. and I'm going to go to Woodstock from Highland Lakes in Vernon up Route 17. And then I hear on the radio and that all the roads are closed, people are leaving their cars and they're walking. And I just couldn't leave my Thunderbird convertible on this side of the road, figuring I'll never get to see this car again. So I didn't go. I didn't go to Woodstock, but I had all the intentions of going.
Well, somehow you weaved your way back into wrestling or into wrestling. Why don't you tell us the story of how you got involved with the magazines and, the rest of your career?
Yeah, well, see, I'm playing in a band, and it's like 1969 or so. I read the newspaper, Daily News, they have those little clips, little clips with the cards, Bruno Sammartino, Christopher Verdue. And I go to my girlfriend, who now has been my wife for 48 years.
Congratulations.
So I say to her, "You want to go to the Garden tonight? They're having wrestling." She says, I don't know what that is. I said, "I used to go when I was young. It'll be fun." And she said, "Okay." So I took my camera with me. And I'm sitting in the low seats, and I'm taking pictures, and I'm having a good time. And then they announce next week, Sunnyside Gardens. They have to do a Saturday afternoon show.
Oh, yeah.
So I said to her, I said,
Saturday matinees.
Yeah. So I said, I used to go to these shows on a Saturday. Yeah, and she says, well, if we're doing nothing, let's go. So that Saturday, I went to Sunnyside Gardens, and it's closer. I'm not on the ring side. I'm a little far back, and I'm running down the aisle taking pictures, and go back to my seat, taking pictures, go back to my seat. Finally, a guy stops me. He says, come here. He says, "You must take good pictures. You got a great camera." I said, "Well, I don't know. Okay, I guess." He says, "If you come here again, let me see your picture. Maybe you can work for me." I said, "Yeah, okay." I just passed it off. I did go back the following month when they announced it, go to Sunnyside Gardens, and I brought these pictures with me. And he says, "Oh, these are great." He says, "You want to work for me?" I says, "Well, what do you mean?" So I work for Ring Wrestling. And he said, I'm looking for a good photographer like that. I said, "Yeah, okay." And he brought me right down to the dressing room to meet Arnold Skolin.
Oh.
And Arnold Skolin used to run all the shows, all of the spot shows and what have you. And so Skolin says to me, "You ever do this before?" I said, "No." He says, "Oh, okay." He says, "Hey, kid, just have a good time, but stay out of the way." And that was my introduction. I went back upstairs. And I at intermission, I went back downstairs to the dressing room, and I met the Grand Wizard, and he befriended me. And then the Wizard, going ahead, introduced me to everybody. I mean, he introduced me to Vince Sr., and he told him, "This guy can really help us. We can need stuff." So, okay. And that's how I got in, because of the Grand Wizard's introduction to everybody after meeting him.
And how long did it take till they let you in the back?
Well, the first day I went right down in the dressing room, but I stayed, I went down, and it was the first day. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't think of anything. I just took a picture of Jimmy Valiant, clean cut. He was Gentleman Jim Valiant. Wow. Clean cut, no tattoos, pushback hair. He looked really good. And the Grand Wizard said, "This is going to be one of the bigger guys." And it turned out that he then teamed up with Beautiful Bobby. They became a team with the Grand Wizard. But again, I didn't know nothing. I just knew the Wizard, and I knew Valiant. I said Valiant, Jimmy Valiant. So whenever he sees me, he says, "Oh man, I will never forget you. You did your first story on me, and that was the first story I ever had in a magazine."
So the guy,
many people have told me that.
George, the guy.
Okay, the guy, his name was. Introduce me. I lost you.
Okay, that's right. The guy that you met at Sunnyside from the magazine, was that Nat Lubay? The guy from
Nat Lubay was the publisher. He was the publisher of the magazine. I met a guy named Sanchez Acosta, Spanish guy.
Huh.
So he's the one that used to write stories. And he said, "Those pictures are great. Why don't you take my story," he gives me his story, "and bring your pictures up to see Nat Lubay." And that was on 31st Street. And Ring magazine was on 31st Street, right down the block from the Garden. So on Saturday, probably Monday, Tuesday, I went with my photos and this guy's story. But I read the guy's story, and it made no sense. It was in pig English. It was really, really, to me, bad. And I was not a writer. I didn't think I was a writer. I never expected to be a writer. I wasn't good in college courses in English. So I handed him the story, and I was embarrassed. I showed him pictures. Oh, these pictures are great. It'll be good for this story. He says, this is one of my top guys. I said, okay. I said, well, in the future, I don't want to take away jobs of his, but if ever you need a story, I think I could do maybe almost as good. I figured I could do almost as good as that, at least almost as good. And they said, oh, whenever you want, just come up and give us the stories. And then from that, I used to write just about the whole magazine, Ring Wrestling. I used to use all kinds of different names, Jack O'Shea and Jay Pulpo and whatever, all kinds of names. My wife's and my girlfriend.
So what? You start writing
O'Shea, my daughter.
You start writing for Ring Magazine, and would they pay to send you on the road?
No, they didn't pay to send me on the road. But then I realized they're taking any story I give them. So the Grand Wizard says to me, we got a big show in Detroit. He was Abdullah Farouk with the Sheik. They said, if you can get there, I get you. I'll take care of you. I'll get you set up. So I said, okay. At that time, there was People Express, I think, or something. It was an airline called People Express.
I remember that.
A flight to Detroit cost you $39.
Wow.
$39. It cost me $80. And I knew that I can do all these extra stories instead of the same people. That's where I learned that if I travel, I would get different material. So I went and I did a story with Pompeo Firpo, the Sheik, Tex McKenzie, Bobo Brazil. I did interviews. I interviewed them. I took the pictures, and then I spaced them out, and I did a lot of stories. So I made my money back twofold, threefold more just by traveling. Nobody was doing it, and nobody was sending in stories from these other places. So no, they didn't pay me to go to Detroit or these places. I paid my way myself, but I knew I would make my money back and make friends all over.
Yeah. Did the New York office ever try and influence you to kind of stay home and just write about their guys, or did they ever give you kind of a...
No, they didn't care. No, not at all. I mean, I used to go into WWE 71, 72, whatever, 73. I used to be right at ringside with any show at the Garden, without a problem. But they never told me, don't do this, don't do that. They only do us. Or, no. I had free reign to do whatever I want. See, because, and then going back to the Wizard, him telling Vince McMahon Sr., he used me. All those posters that you use, a lot of those pictures of mine on those posters, because I used to do the 8x10 glossies. And then I would sell the 8x10 glossies at the show, at the local shows. There was shows in Brooklyn and Queens, Brooklyn, Queens, Staten Island, all the boroughs. And then Connecticut had shows. Tony Altomori ran shows in Connecticut. So he said, hey, kid, you want to sell programs here? I said, oh, okay. So I used to bring the pictures and the programs. And Gorilla Monsoon ran New Jersey. And then Mario Savoli ran New Jersey. And then I would sell the programs and photos. And that's when the guys, they didn't look for money. I mean, they're getting paid. They were happy. And I used to make a couple bucks. And I would split it with Gino and Skolin and whoever was running the towns. They knew I'd give them the honest number, unlike some people. I used to count out how many programs were sold and pictures were sold, give them the money right there, and I made money on it.
When did WWF start doing merchandise? Because when I would go in the 70s, the only thing you could buy is a program.
Yeah, well then, when the spot shows, you can get 8x10s. They didn't. Okay, the real story, Vince McMahon Jr. bought the Cape Cod Coliseum. Okay. Yeah. When he bought the Cape Cod Coliseum, he would have the circus come to town. He would have singers come to town. All kinds of people come to town to perform in his building. And he realized that they were coming in with merchandise. I should do this too. Why don't we have merchandise? They never did it before. But by seeing the circus, what they did selling the lights and things, so that's how he got into merchandise, by seeing this. And this was years are so compressed, I forget. I want to pick it out. I want to say 78, 77, 78 or so. Sounds good to me, Ron. You know.
That's incredible. Did you, as you go through the early 70s, did you sense a changing of the guard? Bruno was kind of phased out at that point. Pedro's in. Bruno obviously comes back, but
yeah. See, I remember when I saw Arnold Skaaland and became friendly with him. I said, Bruno was my favorite. Now he's no longer the champ. I wish I would see him. He says, you'll get to see him, kid. You'll see him again soon. He'll be back. I said, okay, but he did come back. But he was my favorite. But I didn't see the changing in the guard. I was so enthralled in what was going on and what I'm seeing in front of me. Like I didn't know that Bruno was going to be gone and Pedro would come in. I didn't know. Nobody told me. I'm not going to say that I had any advanced knowledge. Some people will tell you, I knew this, I knew that. They knew nothing. Nobody said a thing. That's all hearsay. Or what some people want to make it themselves important.
Right.
What was it like when Billy Graham came in? Because he was unlike anything anybody had ever seen before. Okay.
I had met Billy Graham prior to him coming in. I met him in Houston, Texas. Huh. He was working out of AWA, and he came into Paul Bosch in a Friday night in Houston, would always bring in top talent. I would love to go there, and that was my favorite place to go because I would see guys from everywhere, top guys. And I met Graham, and he looked so impressive. And I did an interview, and I did a story. I sent him the story, and he was happy because nobody knew who he was. I mean, nobody knew who these people were because you couldn't really see them on videotape. Didn't exist, and you couldn't see them on your TV. You only saw what was local to you. You never saw them, So when Graham got this magazine article, he loved it, and then we became friends. He called me and said that he was going to do a bodybuilding competition. And would I pick him up at the airport? And I said, okay. And I took him to a bodybuilding thing. Not wrestling, bodybuilding. And he did all these poses and that. And he didn't win, but he showed well. And then we really became friendly. And then after that, he called me up one day and said, I'm coming to New York. I'm going to New York. You pick me up? I said, yeah, of course. I went and picked him up. And then I became his gopher, maybe call it that, call it whatever, but I became his chauffeur, his gopher, his chauffeur. And I would drive him around to all of the towns close by, any local spots. In fact, I would take him into Boston, and then we do the Boston Gardens. And he became a real good friend. I mean, so Bruno was like, I have to do it. But Graham was just tremendous.
Well, not only did you chauffeur Billy Graham, but here's a man that personally knew. So you don't be crazy. Right? So he knew Lee Wong.
Wow,
and Frankie Williams.
Wow, that's Frankie.
Okay. I used to drive. I drove all the time, So to get to places you had to drive, and Carrie knows the story. Many times I would pick Lee Wong up at 36th Street in Brooklyn, 36th Street Station, 4th Avenue. He would come from the city. I would put him in my car, and I would drive him to Philadelphia. And many times he was with Frankie Williams. I used to take Lee Wong and Frankie Williams, both of them, But I befriended early on. I befriended the enhancement talent, as we call it today. Call it what you want. The lower tier card guys. I became friendly with them because I used pictures of them. Before that, nobody would ever take their picture. And I would put them in the program. And so I became really friends with Manny Soto.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm sure Johnny Ross,
Richards. Chuck Richards. I used to go sometimes to Carteret, New Jersey, where he lived, park my car on the side, and he would drive me. And then with the Spanish group, Pedro Morales would drive me around. I would be in the car with Manny Soto, and I hate to say the name, Jose Gonzalez. He was became a good friend. Jose Gonzalez, Manny Soto, myself, and Frankie Rodriguez or Adams, whoever else I could squeeze in. But there was always a spot for me in the car, in Pedro's Lincoln, going up to Boston and what have you. Nice. That's how you did. Everything was by car, and you drove with people. You rode,
Well, what was not by car was going to Puerto Rico. When did you start going to Puerto Rico?
Okay. I started going to Puerto Rico now. Again, a year could be off by a year or two. I want to say 75.
Wow. Okay.
And at that point, because Jose Gonzalez, we stayed in touch, and he called me. He says, I'm now the booker in Puerto Rico, and I'm really doing good. He says, why don't you come here? Come on. Why don't you come here? I said, okay. I didn't know Puerto Rico from nothing. And I went to Puerto Rico, and he was the invader. And it was like 75, 76. And that's how I got to go to Puerto Rico, just because of him. And then because I had been doing it for several years, everywhere you went, you knew somebody that prior. And not only Jose, then I knew at that point Fuji was there, and Luke Graham, who I known from New York. And to see you again, you become even more friendly with these people. But that's when it was, like 75 or so, 76, 70, not 74, but 75, 76, Puerto Rico. And then I went there every year. They would have the anniversary show, have a big show. And I would make sure I go there every September. And whenever there was a blow-off, I would go at least 2-3 times a year to Puerto Rico, because I knew I can push Abdullah and get a bloody cover, or whoever. And there's always going to be different people there that I ain't seen somewhere else.
And you became friends with Abdullah too, right?
Oh yeah. That goes back to Abdullah goes back to 72. He was wrestling in the NWF, National Wrestling Federation. And I was in Utica, and this guy's crazy guy. I'd seen his picture in a magazine, and I wanted to meet him. And so he was standoffish for a little bit, and then he just opened up, and he became a great guy. And I just took these crazy pictures of him. I knew whenever I saw Abdullah, and he knew it too. He was on the cover, and he was going to get a lot of coverage. He knew it, and then we became really friendly. It was 74. He says to me, "I'm going to be in Montreal, Jarry Park." This goes back now to the bushwhackers, sheep herders.
Right.
I said, he says, "Why don't you come?" He says, "Yeah, they're having your Italian guys are going to be there." I says, "What do you mean?" He says, San Martino, Tony Marino, all these other Italian guys. I'm going to be there. I said, "Yeah, okay, I'm going to go." So me and my wife and another couple went to Montreal, went to Niagara Falls. We went to Montreal. Niagara Falls is too far away, but we went to Montreal. Montreal is straight up from Albany. That was a different story I was getting into. Right. So I called Abdullah, and he told me what hotel. I called Abdullah in a hotel. He says, come and meet me. So me, my wife, and 2 friends go to Abdullah, and Abdullah puts us in the cab with him, and he drives us to Jarry Park. We get close to Jarry Park. People started pounding on the car, shaking the car, rocking it. And Abdullah says, "I'll give you $100 for every one of them that you hit." And my wife is like, "What's going on here?" So the couple didn't know what. They had no idea what was going on. And we went to the match, and it was insane. Just Abdullah, what he did. And my wife, girlfriend at the time, never had experienced anything like that. And my friends never did either. But that's how I met Abdullah. And then from there, I went to the 3-ring circus in Cleveland. They had 3 rings set up on Municipal Stadium in Cleveland. It was another big show. Abdullah, got to come. So when Abdullah said, "You got to come," I went. Right. And then I met Johnny Valentine and all kinds of people. Johnny Powers ran the show. A guy named Johnny Powers. It was really big at that point.
When did you start your transition to doing your own magazines?
Okay. When I realized that my stories were filling up a whole magazine as it is, without having my own magazine, I was filling up a whole magazine. I knew I could do it. There was a book called Main Event. I don't know if you know it. It was a book before my books, Main Event, and it was a girl, and she became friendly with me, and she needed pictures, and I gave her all kinds of pictures. And then one day she called me and says, I'm working for a magazine. We're going to call it Main Event. And that's what they did. It was called the Wrestling's Main Event magazine. I said, okay, so I need stories. I need pictures. I said, at that point, I didn't want to give her nothing else. She says, I really need help. I'm drowning. I can't do this. So I go up there, and the magazine, I got to go to ship, and she had no stories. So I did 8 stories. The next day, I had 8 pictures, 8 stories, and then she said, "Oh, you saved me! You saved me!" And she said, "I can't do this." She said, "I'm going to tell the publisher." So she goes in and quits cold. The guy says to me, "You want to do this?" I said, "Yeah, okay," because I knew that I could just fill a magazine with my own stuff, just whatever. I didn't want to just do my own, but I knew I could do it, and that's how it was. And I stayed there for a couple of years until, like everything else, you don't get paid, and money gets into the story, and we'll pay you next month. Next month, and next month became next month, and I was owed almost for a whole year worth of material. Wow. And somebody from Starlog magazine approached me, called me up and said, we want to start a wrestling magazine. I didn't want to do it, but he says, you can do whatever you want, which I was doing anyway. I said, okay. And he said, I'm going to pay you this. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this because I know I'm going to get money. And that's how I went to Starlog. And I started, it wasn't my own magazine, but I started the magazines. And then at Starlog, I did Wrestling All-Star, Wrestling Scene, TV Wrestler, Superstar Wrestler, Ringside Wrestling, Wrestling Reporter, Badass Dudes, Women of Wrestling, Beauties of Wrestling, and I'm leaving out 5 more titles.
What was there?
Raw versus Nitro and whatever.
George, was there any money in this?
What was that?
Was there any money in this?
I was making pretty good money. Every magazine I did, I got paid. It wasn't like I worked and he said, let's do more. If you work somewhere and they want to give you more work, you get the same pay. But my deal was every magazine I produced, I got paid. Every package I submitted, I got paid. So every time he wanted a new magazine, because magazines were going through the roof, I got paid. I got another magazine under my belt. And at one point, 1 month, couple months, and I can actually say when, in the 90s, I did 9 magazines in 1 month.
Wow. 9
newsstand magazines.
Wow.
Okay, figure it out. Yeah. How many stories. And people say, oh, you're a great photographer. But I wrote so much more than people realize, or I'm giving, quote, credit for. I'm a photographer, yeah, okay, which is great, I am. But for every set of photos I did, there was a story that I wrote with it. So I wasn't just this guy snapping pictures and sending pictures off,
Which era was harder for you to keep up with, the mid '80s boom, the rock and wrestling, or the Attitude Era?
I want to say the '90s with WCW and all the stuff that was going on, and NWO and that, and then with having Steve Austin and The Rock and Vince McMahon as the hated Mister McMahon. Right then, that was the hottest that wrestling was to me. But there was always different times that was really hot. 80s was big. After WrestleMania, when WrestleMania 2, 3, 4, at that point, hot because of WCW coming in or Mid-Atlantic or whatever it was at the time. But I think the hottest that I ever envisioned was during the 90s with The Rock and Austin and McMahon and NWO on the other side.
And in the 80s, you wrote a couple books, right? There's the one that I know with
yeah, okay. The first book was called Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Mm-hmm. Wrestling, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. And I did it with a guy named Bert Sugar, who was a big boxing guy. Mm-hmm. And Bert had action for the book, you know. He called me and says, "Hey, I want to do a book on wrestling, but I don't know nothing. I need you." I said, "Oh, okay." So it was all my pictures, just about 90% of my stories, but Bert had the in. And then we did Wrestling's Great Grudge Matches, another one. It was a hardcover coffee table book. And then Bert said, "Whatever you want to do, go do it on your own. You don't need me now, you know." And so then I wrote different books with different people. And altogether, I've done 12 books.
Wow.
There's 12 books out there somewhere.
Did George? I'm sorry. Did Bert Sugar ever get?
I'm sorry.
Did Bert Sugar ever get you involved with boxing?
No, I did a few boxing matches for him, you know, just because he had something to do with the Ring magazine. But he had his own people that did that too, and I was doing my other thing. So I never really got into boxing that much. Boxing at that time, you would have one big fight, couple big fights a year, not that many. And people from a lot of places wanted to come and cover that. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't as many spots open, you know. I did a few boxing matches locally and different things, but I never really got into it. I mean, just to go to the tangent, and then at some point I did a hockey magazine. I did a baseball magazine. Something else I'm leaving out. I don't know. But I did other stuff too, only because I wanted to try to do something different. The hardest thing I ever did was the hockey magazine. Because once you see a hockey guy and you try to take the picture, if you see it, you miss the shot. It's so fast that you miss the shot all the time. And then I had to learn about hockey. But hockey, you got the Garden, you had the Meadowlands, and you had the Nassau Coliseum. Mm-hmm. I was out more doing this hockey stuff for a while than anything because there was just so many games all the time.
So with the hockey,
that's just something that I did. You know.
Yeah. With the hockey stuff, is that about when, you know, WWF at some point kicks all the photographers out and they want to do their own magazine?
No.
No,
not at all. The hockey thing was at some point in the 80s, late 80s. What you're talking about is they wanted to do their own magazine. Okay, that came about when they knew that they were going to run the world. Okay. And very little I've ever said this, but I had a meeting with Mister McMahon, and he said to me, he says, I'm going to take over the wrestling world, and I want you to do my magazine. He says, you can move to Stamford, Connecticut, and you'll be in charge of the magazine for me, and we're going to do big. And I said, it's all good and well, but I live in Brooklyn, New York. I was teaching school. I said, I have a young kid. I'm teaching. He said, I don't know that I can just move Stanford. He said, oh, it'll be great. It's good Stanford. I said, no, but I like what I'm doing. I said, I like going around the country, going to all these different matches. He says, these places are going to cease to exist. I'm going to take over. And I told him I didn't want to do it. I told him I didn't want to do it. But he did ask me. I really have never said that. Maybe to a couple of people, I never really said that. But now I knew this was happening. I told a couple of the other photographers. They said, no, they can't do it. I said, they're going to run their own thing, and we're going to be asked politely to leave. And they didn't believe me. And it happened the night when Hulk Hogan defeated the Iron Sheik. He says, no, you guys, that's it. I don't need none of you here. I'm doing my own thing. And they all kicked everybody out. Wow. But what that did was, I was still doing magazines. What that really did was made me now go to Charlotte, go to Texas, all these places, and promote, photograph what they were presenting, putting them in the magazines. So by kicking all the photographers out, he made the other people last 10 years longer than they would have if he wouldn't have done that. If he would have said, why don't you just concentrate on what I'm doing here? And we would have, only because it's in our backyard.
Right.
I would have done the Junkyard Dog and all these other people because it's in my backyard. I don't have to travel to Dallas and Greensboro and what have you, all these different places. But so it made wrestling, it was continued until 90. I don't even know when he took over, 94, 95 or whatever. And this is 10 years later. So 10 years later, all these places, people started hearing about different wrestlers in other territories that you would not have heard about or read about had this not happened, And again, but then cable TV took over, and then cable pushed Southwest Championship Wrestling with the dreaded sheep herders. I would go there, San Antonio, and Tully Blanchard, and what they were doing, and then Pensacola. I would go in all these different places. Then I was really going more places than I ever did, only to fill the pages of the magazine.
Yeah, George, we had Gary Juster on a few weeks ago, and he was telling us how Joe Blanchard gave him a tape, the tape they were running on USA, to try to pitch to get him into Baltimore. It went off the air, or it didn't work, and then he got Championship Wrestling from Georgia into the Baltimore arena. When did you meet Gary Juster?
Good question. I don't remember exactly, but at least from the 80s, right. At least we became really friendly. And in fact, me and my wife went to Gary Juster's wedding in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
We went to his wedding. I mean, we were close. That's why I'm so happy when ROH comes around, and I get a lot of
It's kicked out.
Oh no, really? Gary. Oh no.
They take care of me.
Mark Davis thing.
Oh, Mark Davis.
Yeah.
Oh.
And they take care of me really well.
We're at the Hammerstein, and Mark said, I only want 2 photographers at ringside. I go, you're going to kick Leonardo da Vinci out? Tell Leonardo da Vinci you can't paint?
Oh, jeez.
But whatever. It is what it is. But yeah, so, well, hopefully, if and when we come back to New York, you'll give them another chance.
Yeah.
I was always so welcome. I always felt welcome when I went to ROH. It was always really heartfelt. They really treated me well.
Oh.
We'll fix that.
We will. I will fix that. Don't worry, George. I will fix that. So,
but at this point, I laugh. It doesn't mean anything, At this point now, my pictures go to Pro Wrestling Illustrated, and I seriously don't feel like I'm involved because I just take these photos, send them off, bye, and then they do whatever they want to do with them. Whereas if I was still doing a magazine or whatever, I would know how many different stories and things I would get out of one particular show. And I would have a lot of stuff to do if it was today, still having a magazine with all the different promotions and things going on. Yeah,
I think a wrestling magazine would still work, despite the internet, despite I think it'll work.
You can't get it out there quick enough.
Right.
It's all old news. I mean, I find incredulous that every 5 minutes on Twitter, there's a news story. I mean, where are these stories coming from? I mean, every five minutes, somebody got this new update. I mean, it's crazy. And you get all the information you want to know. Some of it real, or most of it fabricated or copied from somebody else. Mm-hmm. And you can hear about everything you want to hear about, and that's how I learned my wrestling, through the Twitter.
Do you feel like the pressure is off now? You mentioned Pro Wrestling Illustrated, which does the sort of semi-annual.
I actually didn't hear you fully. Just say it again, please.
Oh, sure. Do you feel like the pressure's off now? Only sending in the photos, not having to write the articles.
Well, not the pressure, but the fun is gone. Oh. I used to like keeping in the back of my head that I'm going to do the story that I would be doing. Matt Tavern or whatever. That when I needed a story, I would have all this material available because every show I went to, the first match, second match, maybe I didn't do then, but I would definitely put those guys the following month. And that's how I became so friendly with so many of the people, because I used to include everybody. I had so many magazines that I just could not, in my own heart, put same WWF guys time after time after time. And I used to put a whole lot of guys that you would not see in other magazines. Puerto Rico, for instance, and different ones. I used to have my crew that I would, you'd always see a picture of Kevin Sullivan. You would always see a bushwhacker shot. There were certain people that every magazine, somewhere, you're going to see these people. But I opened up to a lot of people.
Was there anybody that used to pitch stories for you? And was there anybody that would make sure to see you to try and get in the magazine each month? Not really, but I just got back to 78 and Superstar Graham. Whenever Superstar saw me like this, his head would pick up and he'd lock somebody in the headlock, turn around and look at me like so he can get on the cover. I mean, that happened many a time. That they knew that if they positioned themselves right, he's over there. Okay, that it was going to be a cover, if not a cover, a pinup somewhere, But that's what I mean. I miss the fun of it, and I told Carrie this. I went to MLW before the epidemic, and I shot ringside, and it had been a long time since I really shot ringside, trying to avoid tables and chairs and anything else, and it was fun, and it was something that I realized this is what I like, just moving and trying to capture the shot and not knowing where it was going to be, but just doing it. It was at an MLW show that I had access to ringside, so I was able to photograph something different. Like these days I do a lot of paparazzi stuff. I call it that, celebrity photography, whether it be a movie premiere, a concert, a show, or a party. And that's what I was doing before COVID, and that's kind of killed all that for the moment. Mm-hmm. But all I got to do is take a picture of them looking at you, and all these people, and I'm taking pictures with 20, 30, 40, 50 photographers. And you say, oh, I got the shot. Well, if you didn't get the shot with them looking right at you, I don't know when you're going to get the shot. I like what the wrestling was that you actually had to get shot. The shot's not there for you, except with Superstar. The shot is not there. You got to make that shot.
George, all
that's what I like about it.
All the years you were at ringside and all these different territories with the Sheik and Abdullah and Luke, did you ever get bumped?
A couple times. In no particular order. In the back of my first book, there's a picture of me with my head in between two ropes because Abdullah saw me. He says, "Come here." I said, "Come here." So I just got a little closer, and he went and he stuck his hand out of the ring and lifted me up from my shirt collar like this and put my head in the ropes. And then somebody took a picture, and that was a big picture in my in the back cover of one of my magazines and the book too. The first time I ever got hit was with Gorilla Monsoon. Monsoon could not see. Right. He could just about barely see 5 feet in front of him. And usually after watching a little bit back and forth, I could read where it's going. Monsoon, you can never read where he was going because he didn't know where he was going. And I'm right at ringside in Madison Square Garden, and all of a sudden, he comes over the top rope, and he lands right on top of me. It's just like, woof. That was the worst I ever got laid out. Was him being on top of me, because I couldn't read him. He weren't sure where he was going. I mean, I know it was because of his eyesight. I don't know if that answered your question, but I never got in a match in the ring or like that.
Yeah. How long did it take to develop those instincts, the shooting? How long do you think it took before, or how many events did it take before you got the shooter instinct, the ability?
It takes a while. You had to, it's hard to say. Just, I'm doing it so long that to go back to that, I don't know. But you always had to stay low. You always had to be wary of the people behind you. And then with the TV cameras, you have to make sure you're not in the shot. So it's hard to stay behind the camera. You got to read the TV cameras because they run in this way, left to right, to try to get the shot. So you got to be out of the camera's way all the time. And they don't know that you're near them. You just got to be aware. You got to look all the way around. Now, it goes to something else. People say, oh, I love this match. I saw this match. And I've seen all my matches through this little hole. I haven't seen it like full screen. And then I could sit back and then I can dissect what's going on and criticize. I'm looking at everything I seen was through this little hole as you're looking through the camera. That's all you see. And so your peripheral vision means a lot. You got to be wary of who's on your left, who's on your right, and other photographers who don't know what they're doing, who can't move. They get stuck. And if you get stuck next to one of them, a guy named Jimmy Suzuki was couldn't move that fast, and you get stuck near him, they're gonna fall on top of you. You're gonna go crazy.
Did you ever have any broken equipment? Anybody run into you? You knocked down the equipment? Did you?
As I'm talking to you, I just thought of something. As I was talking to you, the last bit, something came to my mind. Cactus Jack come running out of the ring, and he sees me. And I had a camera over here around my neck, the camera. He sees me, and he grabs the camera out of my hand and hits the opponent. I don't remember who, but it was at Madison Square Garden. The flash goes flying, the camera goes rolling, the thing opens up. Yeah, that camera was not good again. That flash was dead. Oh. And he said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I did that." That was the thanks I got. Practiced and it didn't get me a new camera.
No, he's not going to go in his pocket.
But yeah, a couple times.
Let me just throw some.
Okay, his first big payday.
I'm sorry?
I was going to say one thing. One of Cactus's first big paydays, signing my book. I got Cactus Jack to appear in Long Island, and he got $100 to sit at the table and sign the book along with me and whatever. And he couldn't stop thanking me for giving him his big job. At that point, it was one of his first really good paying jobs. We've been friends forever, great guy. And that's a guy who worked really hard to make a name for himself and to work hard to make something for himself. You were going to say something, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, I just throw a couple names out. You touched on Gorilla Monsoon, you touched on the Sheik, you touched on Abdullah and our friend Bushwhacker Luke. What about Andre the Giant? How was your relationship?
Really? Andre, 1972 against Don Leo Jonathan, Jean Ferrer versus Don Leo Jonathan, Montreal Forum, 1972. So I was already traveling, going to Montreal again, knowing I'm going to get different material. And I was told there's a guy, that's a giant, some big guy, new guy from France. I want to go. And I was friendly with Butcher Vachon, who was the promoter, Grand Prix. And Butcher says, you can spend the night at my house. So I stayed at Butcher's house. But I met Andre there. And I wanted to take his picture, but he wasn't dressed. He didn't get dressed to the end. So I never got a pose photo, but I got all kinds of pictures of him against Don Leo Jonathan. And I think they showed it on a couple pictures of Andre against Don Leo, black and white photos in the Andre the Giant piece that they would just went on A&E or whatever, Yeah. So I met him. I knew Andre just like that. 1974, when he first comes to the Garden, his first shot, I'm in the back, and Mister McMahon Sr. goes to Andre. He says, Andre, this is our photographer, George. He says, oh, I know him. I met him in Montreal. Boss, he's my friend. And he shook my hand, and he told Vince that I was his friend. So Vince said, where'd you meet him? I said, I went to Montreal. He says, oh, they had an idea, but they had no idea, what I did or didn't do. They just saw me, yeah. But that's where I met Andre. And then after that, we became really friendly. And I got so many pictures of Andre holding up my son. If you might have seen it in the documentary, holding up a kid, that's my son. And my wife, holding up my wife and all kinds of stuff. He was really nice. And many a night, I would sit at the bar at the Howard Johnson. He would sit in the corner, and the other boys were reluctant to stay with him because he would say, boys, drink, and they couldn't drink or stay up all the time. And invariably, he was nobody with him. And I would sit down at the bar with Andre and just keep him company, just to watch the people that I asked him for autographs and just make sure he was okay. Many, many a night, I would stay 2, 3, and 4 in the morning, just sitting with Andre. And he would say, boss, you want something? He said, give him Coke. Because I wasn't a drinker, but he didn't push drinks on me, but we were really, really, really close. He was very nice to me, and I seen how he changed later, only because his back, and he was a pain. He had a hard life.
Mm-hmm. How about, I'll throw one more name at you. Hulk Hogan. How about Hulk Hogan?
Hulk Hogan.
Transitional era, but did you know him?
Of course. He came out to me, and he was this young, good-looking hair, like blonde hair, and that. In no order. For some reason, this comes to my mind. One time he comes to me and he says, listen, he says, you got thin hair, and I still do. He says, they want me to get plugs in my head, like Bruno. And he says, what do you think? I says, how can I tell you what you think? I says, this is my hair. He said, would you get plugs? I said, no, I wouldn't get them, but maybe you might want to get them. But that's what he told me. And then it was one night in the Garden, he's wrestling Andre. This is before, he wrestles Andre in the Garden, and I meet him for dinner at the Howard Johnson afterwards. And during this dinner we're having after the matches, he says, Andre broke my nose. I said, what do you mean? He says, yeah, in tonight's match, you broke my nose. Did you see it? And I really say, no, I didn't. He says, he grabbed me, punched me, and says, don't forget, brother. Don't forget, boss, you're a wrestler, not a movie star. He was afraid at that point that a wrestler was going to give away trade secrets and not to give away the secrets. And this was the day before he was going for the screen test. And he was really upset that this happened, that the next morning he was going to LA for the screen test. And Andre broke his nose.
Oh.
I mean, I've been friends with him forever. And when NWO, he would see me. At that point, sometimes I would have a little problem, whatever, because if there were a lot of Indians who thought they were chiefs, telling you what to do, what you can't do. And he said, what's the matter? I said, I'm having a little. He says, what? He says, you have no trouble. And he went and he said something to somebody. And after that, whenever they saw me, oh, can we help you? Like they would bow.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, George, it's really been a pleasure. I have one name for you. I got to ask. I've seen the picture of you and The Rock together
Okay.
What's your relationship like with The Rock?
Okay. When The Rock came around at first, young guy, didn't know who he was from a hole in the wall. He come over, introduced himself. He says, you know my father for many years. You took care of him. You know my grandfather for many years. He says, I know you even know my grandma. He says, and you've always been so nice to them. He says, if there's anything I can ever do for you, please don't hesitate to ask, and I'll do it. This is before it was The Rock, but I didn't need his help. I mean, honestly, I'm not saying that. So I never really pushed his help because I was able to get whatever I could get out of that. But then when I would see his mom is a big wrestling fan forever. And whenever I see his mom, he would say, oh, Twain always says hello to you, how nice you are. And so, yeah. And fast forward many, many years, I really, after he left WWE, I never really saw him. I would take these pictures of movie premieres, and his movies would premiere always in LA for some reason. One time he has a premiere in New York, and he sees me. I'm taking pictures like this, like everyone else. And finally, he spots me. He says, George. And he pushes through the photographers and everybody. And he puts his arm and starts talking to me. And the people yelling, we want Rock, we need your picture. We need your picture. He said, oh, leave me alone. So now I seen him again 3 months later. And this was at Time 100, the 100 most influential people of all time. And that's the shot that you've seen a lot. So again, I'm taking pictures. You can't see. I put the camera down. He sees me. He goes right across. He starts hugging me again, and all these guys are yelling. And he says, stop it, stop it. He says, I'm talking to George. You should know George. He's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
He says, this is the guy. He's done more than any of you people. Because all these photographers are yelling at him. And he said, so then he says, brother, anytime you need anything, remember, you call on me. Okay. And that was the last time I seen him. Right? But he's really does love wrestling. He loves it. It was in his blood, and his whole family was into it just so much. As I say, his mom sends me notes every once in a while or a Christmas greeting, and
Oh, they're a sweet family.
And then right before Rocky passed, it was an autograph session in New Jersey, somewhere in New Jersey. And he sees me. He says, come here. He says, I want a picture with you. He says, what do you mean? He says, you just took a picture with my son. I'm not good enough. You can't take a picture with me. I want to show him. So I had to take a picture so he can send it to the son that he met me too. And then that day, me, him, and Luke, I took them to Newark Airport. We went to eat, and then I took him to the airport, and he died a week later. So it was his last appearance, yeah. Yeah.
Well, we love the family here. I'm from Allentown, and Rocky obviously wrestled here quite a bit. And then
I went to many Allentown shows.
Yeah.
I went to many, many shows in Allentown.
Yeah,
many shows here. Every 3 weeks. Allentown.
Yeah, do you have any
I didn't like going to Hamburg.
No.
It was right down the road.
I'm sorry?
Hamburg was like 30 minutes.
What's that?
Boo. Allentown's better.
But that was 30 more. It was 30 more minutes. I would get to that spot and I was, oh God, it's about 40 minutes. I got 40 more minutes to go and I'm tired. I also taught school. And I would go there after a day of teaching junior high school Puerto Rican kids. It was madness. So I would get in my car, again, drive, and I would drive a couple hours, and that extra 40 minutes to get to Hamburg was just a little too much for me.
Okay.
I used to drive to Hamburg every 3 weeks. Not Hamburg, but Allentown every 3 weeks. The only time I went to Hamburg was when Billy White Wolf got sent to the hospital by somebody. I think it might have been Greg Valentine. Was this big angle. He says, "Oh, come to Hamburg. We need you." And then I went to the hospital in Hamburg somewhere. I took pictures of him lying in the hospital bed. Yeah.
Did you ever have any ice cream at the Ritz on the Allentown Fairgrounds, or ever go to the bar?
No, I went to the fairgrounds one time only, but I used to go every 3 weeks to get the new guys that came in, to get the new, and usually a tag team title would change. Get that tag team title change a lot of times, and just to catch up on some people, because I knew everybody was there. And if I needed photos, mostly of the new people that are coming in, so I can make an 8x10 glossy for them to use for their posters that Kerry has, or for whatever they wanted to use them for the programs, And also, too, at a certain point, I want to say 76, 77, I used to do the program for Madison Square Garden. I was the editor of the program for the Garden. And so I used to have to go out and get the new guy who's ever going to be in the main event. And I want to say this here because people say, oh, look, the match, I'm just picking on a name. The match is Bruno and Superstar, and look what's on the cover. They had the wrong people on the cover. Well, that was a general program, and it didn't match exactly everywhere. I didn't have the cover of who's going to be on the main event in Boston, but it might have been the main event in the Garden. It was a general program with an insert other than the Garden.
Yeah,
I just there's so many more things that I've done and that I've forgotten more than I'll ever remember. Yeah.
That's all right. We appreciate you coming on. Before I let you go, you've heard some of these episodes. I talk about my life, and back in the days, Ian, who went to NYU, right? He didn't see Times Square in the 70s and 80s. He doesn't think that stuff was.
He saw it.
He thinks something.
He saw it as Disneyland. It was like Disneyland.
Disneyland.
It was Disneyland when he saw it. It was bad. 8th Avenue. If you walked 8th Avenue, you were taking your life into your hands. If you walked 8th Avenue. If you walked 7th, you were okay. But 8th was really no good. And Howard Johnson was on 8th and 48th, 49th. And at night, it was a little scary. So I used to try to park only 1 block away if I could get a spot, or park right in the lot, because I knew that I didn't want to walk 3 blocks in the wrong direction. It was really bad. Seedy, yes. Everything that you've heard is true. It was bad. And a lot of the boys, when they came to town, they wanted to take the tour. They wanted to see what they didn't see in their cities. There was a lot of sights, a lot of sounds that these people who came from North Carolina and wherever, they were like flabbergasted when they seen it. I was driving with Tommy Rogers, the late Tommy Rogers, and Bobby Fulton, and we're driving down 8th Avenue, and they said, wow, oh, stop. They wanted to stop to get a closer look at what was going on. And Tommy was too scared. He sat in the back seat. No, I'll stay here. But Bobby walked out and wanted to see everything. It was insane. Whatever you might have heard was so much worse than anything you have heard.
But it was fun sometimes.
So much.
It was fun sometimes.
Yeah, it was different. Something you didn't see everywhere.
Was there anybody that would lead the tour?
I remember.
Would there be any of the regulars?
I'm sorry?
Was there any of the regulars like Tony Garea or any of the regular WWF guys that would kind of show anybody the ropes of the area? I'm sure they did. I'm sure they did. But they didn't need to, because they had their own group of quote rats, unquote. They had their own group that they didn't need to go venture out farther than they need be. Gotcha.
We get the picture.
But it was a crazy scene, and in New York in the 70s and the 80s was something that you can't you can't imagine that this went on for as long as it did too. But Giuliani, it's crazy Giuliani now, but he cleaned it up. Yeah, clean it up, correct?
Yeah. Now he's.
Before I forget, one night, go back to Andre. I took Andre to Studio 54.
Really?
Whoa.
At the height of Studio 54. So we go to the side door, go to the front down there, Studio 54, and people waiting, trying to get in. And there's Andre standing. I says, "You, come here." So I'm with Andre because Andre needed a chaperone. So I'm following Andre, and he says, "You ain't getting in here." Andre says, "Boss, he's with me." So we went into Studio 54, and it was. That was everything that you've heard, and plus more. It was a crazy, crazy scene.
Wow.
And,
what year was this? Was this the 70s or
78?
77, 78.
Was Debbie Harry
Like
there
that.
at one point? She was hanging out. Did you see? I know she was a huge wrestler.
I didn't see it that night. Well, you mentioned everything goes into something else. Deborah Harry, in my most recent book, there's a picture of her and Lou Albano. Mm-hmm. Deborah Harry used to love wrestling. Her and Chris, they were huge wrestling fans. They would always sit behind me. A half dozen times I took them to the back and I introduced them to everybody. And I got pictures of them with Greg Valentine, Jimmy Valiant, Andre the Giant, Bruno Sammartino, because they were real wrestling fans. She was before the Rock and Wrestling Connection. Deborah Harry was it. She was so big. Her and Chris Stein, big wrestling fans. Another guy who was a wrestling fan, Luther Vandross, at the Garden. I took Luther, and I introduced him around. At that time. I had as much reign as I did with ROH. I was able to do what I wanted. No.
One more
somebody around.
One more name. What about Andy Warhol?
Okay, and that's when I took a diversion when he said Deborah Harry. Andy Warhol was at Studio 54, and he wanted his picture with Andre. He gives me his camera, so I took his picture with Andre at Studio 54.
You're blowing my mind here. So you're telling me you went to Studio 54 with Andre the Giant and you met Andy Warhol?
Yes.
What planet?
But at that point, listen. At that point, I didn't have my camera. Everybody didn't have a phone. You didn't have camera at disposal. People were Instagramming it and sending it everywhere. Right. It didn't happen. It didn't happen. Nobody can. So I didn't even go in there. My cameras were in my trunk of my car after the show. I didn't have my camera with me. I didn't want to put the camera in their face after the show or before the show. I did the show and I did what they did. I didn't want to divulge what they did outside. That was their life.
Can you walk us through how Andre approaches you? How does he say, "Hey, boss, I want to go to Studio 54"? Is it that simple?
It just came up. Wow. We were sitting there. We're sitting there like I'm sitting next to him. Somebody says Studio 54. Boss, where's that? I said, it's around the corner. I mean, he says, let's go. We have a problem. Andre, you ain't going to have a problem. Let's go. And we went. And we walked the street. Nobody bothered you. You walk the street. Go a couple blocks, go up the block, and it's right there. I mean, it's right off of 8th and 7th, 54th. And 49th was the Howard Johnson on the corner of 49th, where the old garden used to be. That was the old garden from your poster days. Mm-hmm. It was at 49th.
You've just blown my
never went. Here's another one. I never went, but Jesse Ventura, when he was out, his favorite shirt, besides the colorful ones we used to try to copy Superstar, we used to wear Plato's Retreat.
Yeah. Did you go there with the body? Did you go?
I said I did not go there with it, but he used to wear his Plato Retreat shirt, and he used to wind up. I was the governor of Minnesota for you.
Yeah, he used to sneak that on TV when he was an announcer, even after.
Oh, those were the days.
Amazing.
Those were the days. Oh, man. George, thank you for doing this with us.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. I don't, when I talk to a lot of these other people, it's really, yeah, blah, 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 I do this, I do that. And it's just, at least I had this one. It wasn't straightforward like some of the others. And, when I talk to a lot of people, they have no idea what I did or didn't do, other than they were told, try to talk to this guy. At least we had some history. It was good.
Well, we do.
Yeah.
And you're my friend. We're both our friends. And we appreciate you. And we'll get you back to Ring of Honor one day.
Absolutely. Yeah. We will make sure that happens. Thank you so much, George. I'm a longtime fan. I've been reading your books and magazines since I was in diapers. So, for real, I'm still in diapers. I still have the original. My brother got the book with Slaughter and I think Kamala and Hulk on it.
Didn't you do the photo with the 4 girls?
Yeah, I took the picture of Andre with the 4 girls.
Yeah,
that was because Vince McMahon Sr. said, "Call me." It was at Philadelphia Arena, 45th and Market. He called me and said, "Listen, I need a picture to show Andre's strength that I can send out to the different promoters around the country." And I told him, I said, "I know you got the girls here tonight. Can we do something with the girls?" He said, "Yeah, okay. What do you want?" I said, "I don't know. I'll think of something." So I made Arnold Skull and get the girls. The girls came out, and Andre put his arm down, and he put 1 girl, 2 girls, and he put the other arm out, and then he stood up. And I took 1 picture, boom, took a second picture, I snapped. He says, "Boss, you got it?" I said, "I think so." I took 1 more, and that was it, 3 pictures. And there was the shot with Andre with the girls that they used everywhere.
Yeah.
As promotion for, yeah. That's when a lot of people ask, "Well, what's your most famous picture? Who's your favorite guy?" Well, the most famous picture is the Andre with the 4 girls, for sure. Because everybody kind of knows that, and I've seen it somewhere.
Right.
It's been, I was in a restaurant in L.A., All American Diner Cafe, and they got pictures of all the people in there, right? It's big. It was Andre the Giant, Andre the Giant Burger. That's what, that's what they were saying. It was in there. So I said, I took that picture. He said, "Sure you did." I said, I did. And they gave me French fries for free.
Well, maybe we can do this again for part 2.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Oh, you're welcome. Take care.
All right. Have a good night, man.
Great to see you, George.
Thank you.
Bye.
We hail you for listening to Last Stop Penn Station podcast. Rate, review, like, subscribe, and share on your favorite platform. Connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, or at laststoppennstation.com.